welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're glad to have everybody here as we talk about the basics of renewable natural gas today. Just to start us off here, I want to tell you a little bit about clean cities and communities in case you're not familiar with us. So Tulsa Area Clean Cities is part of the Department of Energy's Clean Cities and Communities Partnership, which includes over 75 coalitions like ours across the country that work at the local level to solve mobility issues and advance alternative fuels for the benefit of air quality, as well as saving fleets money. So Clean Cities coalitions are all working to enhance the economic, environmental, and energy security of the United States by working locally to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels, energy-efficient mobility systems, and other fuel-saving technologies and practices. And in our work, we're building partnerships among our coalition members, bringing together experts like we have here speaking with us today, as well as decision makers with local fleets, public and private. We work across our coalition to connect folks with unbiased, data-driven tools and resources that are fuel agnostic, so we're not favoring any one technology or the other, but we're just trying to provide solutions that folks are looking for and matching them up with the right solutions for their project. We provide personalized experiences rooted in local context through our work, and we also collaborate with our members on funding opportunities. Some funding opportunities do come from INCOG, the agency that Tulsa Clean Cities is housed under, and some other funding opportunities are state or federal in nature. There are a few that are offered by private businesses, which we'll touch on briefly today. But we can also help fleets and other stakeholders connect with those funding opportunities. So to give you an idea of where coalitions are located across the country, there's a coalition covering most communities in the U.S. and most of the major population areas. In Oklahoma, Tulsa Area Clean Cities and Central Oklahoma Clean Cities together cover the entire state. So Tulsa Area Clean Cities, as you can see, we cover all of this eastern portion of Oklahoma, a little bit west toward the north of the state, so we have some of the I-35 corridor as well. And then Central Oklahoma Clean Cities, led by Eric Pollard and David Frick, who I believe are on the call today, they handle the western side of the state. So before we get started today, you should know that this meeting is being recorded. If you would like to ask a question or pose one for the Q&A at the end of today's presentations, you can use that Q&A feature at the top of your screen. There's also a chat that you can utilize at the top of your screen to talk with other attendees. And if you would like to us to enable your mic, you can use the raise hand feature to ask a question aloud. But we do ask that unless it's a super pertinent question to what someone was speaking about, to hold those until the very end when we go through Q&A, please. So today's presenters, we have Yanni Sarias, who is the Manager of State Legislative Affairs with the RNG Coalition. We have Tom Sewell, who's the President of Tulsa Gas Technologies, as well as Blue Energy Fuels. We have Jenny Hellman, who's a Managing Partner with Black Mesa Advisors. And we have Eli Pagel, who's the Director of Business Development with B&H Construction, to offer a fleet perspective on renewable natural gas use. So our agenda for today, we're going to kick off with Yanni providing an explanation of renewable natural gas and its benefits for fleet users. We're going to cover incentives and partnerships for fueling, and Tom Sewell will cover a little bit on that topic. Jenny will tell us a little bit about the Renewable Fuel Standard program that provides an additional benefit for RNG users financially compared to CNG. Then we'll touch on a regulatory outlook as well for the fuel. Lastly, we're going to go through a fleet example and have some commentary from B&H Construction. We'll review some resources, and then we will close with Q&A. So I will go ahead and start by introducing our first speaker. Yanni Sarayas serves as the RNG Coalition's Manager of Western Legislative Affairs. Previously, he worked as the Eastern Regional Director at Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, where he led government affairs teams to advance pro-growth, market-based climate solutions, and decarbonization policy. He brings extensive experience in building strategic partnerships and advancing clean energy policy to the RNG Coalition's Western state legislative initiatives. And he holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from the University of Central Florida. And Yanni, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. In our as we kick off our December and close to the end of the year. As mentioned, I'm the manager of state government affairs for the RNG Coalition. The RNG Coalition is the national trade association for the RNG industry and represents more than 400 members across North America who produce more than 90% of RNG on the continent. Our mission is to advocate for the sustainable development, deployment, and utilization of RNG so that present and future generations have access to clean fuel, heat, and energy. So today I'll walk through what RNG is and how it works with existing CNG equipment, and most importantly have very practical benefits of RNG in Oklahoma. Kick off my next slide. Thank you. Start with the basics. RNG, or renewable natural gas, is simply captured methane. Our members collect methane from landfills, dairies, food waste facilities, and wastewater plants, and organic sources. And instead of what would usually be done is flaring it off or venting it into the atmosphere, they capture it, refine it, and it is turned into a source of energy. What draw me especially to the RNG industry is the fact that it takes what it would be a waste and it turns it into a very valuable source of energy. And it is not a new or emerging technology. It's something that has been researched for decades, and it is a proven solution that, as I said, turns a waste problem into a usable and reliable fuel. Next slide, please. And at the RNG Coalition, as we advocate for the industry, and our mission is to assist in expanding market access and the development, one of our long-term strategies is the SMART initiative, the Sustainable Methane Abatement and Recycling Timeline, which is effectively, we assist our members in expanding the facilities. And earlier, we have these benchmarks of operational facilities by a certain point, and we were able to hit our 500th operational RNG facility in North America ahead of schedule by 6 months. It was completed the 500th facility was completed in June, and we are on track with hitting the 1,000th operating facility by 2030 in terms of planned facilities or in construction. But what that means for fleets is that RNG isn't a theoretical fuel. It's widely available today, and supply is scaling fast. In my next slide here, it'll just showcase, how the traction that where these facilities are. And we look at Oklahoma, there's about 15 facilities that are either planned or in construction. There was a time when RNG was limited to a select few states, but now, especially with the expansion of state policies and policies at the federal level, production is happening pretty much anywhere where waste exists, especially in Oklahoma. And what that means for fleets is that this growing supply chain often will mean that as supply increases, there's more competitive pricing, dependable partners, to get your fuel from, and long-term fuel security. And anecdotal, but at the federal level, I've had a few very good conversations with some members of the Department of Energy, and there was a degree of uncertainty, especially in this new administration. But a lot of the conversations that I've had with some former colleagues at the DOE is that RNG is considered a part of this American energy dominance plan that the administration has in mind for America's energy portfolio. So seeing RNG as a part of that really shows that it's not going anywhere, and it'll continue to grow and serves as an incredibly important domestic energy source here in the U.S. Next slide, thank you. And when you compare it, total U.S. natural gas consumption to RNG production potential, the scale of opportunity is incredibly clear. Studies have shown that there's more than 16 quadrillion BTUs of potential RNG in the U.S., which is a lot more than people realize. And when you look at just how far the in production has come in just in the last decade alone, I mean, that's 600% increase. And it's accelerating fast, especially when looked at just the amount of planned facilities that are there. And it has such an incredible use as well, especially as a transportation fuel. And that potential is incredibly clear in the next slide. And just a sort of zooming out a bit to look at the production potential, this map highlights where RNG could be produced across North America, and look at the central U.S., including the region surrounding Oklahoma. Such a strong potential from agriculture, food processing, and especially landfills. RNG can become an increasingly, it's becoming domestic, local, and reliable fuel source. But especially in the central U.S., where there is so much potential, and many of this potential can be met with state policy mechanisms. There's conversations certainly being had throughout the country. Started on the West Coast, and continuing to grow, especially over the last decade, and especially in the last half of this decade. There's an incredible amount of policy mechanisms being discussed that will continue to increase RNG production and scale the production. And just to sort of showcase, the process of how RNG is created, and especially, it's identical to natural gas. You start with an organic waste source. It's put into a anaerobic digester where bacteria breaks it down, and you create this biogas, which is it's unupgraded renewable natural gas, which is then refined into renewable natural gas, where it can then be directly injected into a pipeline and then delivered as natural gas. And why switch to RNG, or why use RNG? It is a drop-in ready fuel. It is molecularly identical to CNG, same methane, same molecule. In fact, it's already, I believe, 80% of natural gas trucks currently used on the road in the United States uses RNG to some extent. Doesn't require any upgrades if you already have a CNG truck. On the economic benefit, which will certainly be already discussed, it's typically priced at or below CNG, but it's certainly especially priced below diesel. And the cost advantage comes from the Renewable Fuel Standard, which will be talked about. But thanks to RIN credits, these credits are monetized, and the value is passed along when the user fills up. And especially when compared to diesel, fleets consistently see lower cost per mile, less maintenance costs after switching, less price volatility, and it's all incredibly seamless. Especially, I know that there's numerous grants that are available to transition to a system that works with RNG or with CNG. And next slide. And thank you all for the time. And to summarize, RNG is a proven and growing fuel made from captured methane, and it works seamlessly with every CNG truck in Oklahoma, and it's already flowing through the gas system.
Thank you, Yanni. And we will also talk a little bit more about the RNG Coalition as a resource toward the end of today's webinar. So moving right forward, our next speaker is Tom Sewell. Tom is the president of Tulsa Gas Technologies, which is a world leader in CNG dispensers and fueling stations. Tom served on the ANSI Natural Gas Vehicle 2 Standards Committee and served on the Oklahoma IFC Uniform Building Code Committee. He is also the founder of Blue Energy Fuels, which owns and operates CNG stations, and he hosts a weekly radio show focused on car care. As an expert in CNG, Tom is a highly sought-after speaker at conferences across the country, so we're very pleased to have him with us today. Please welcome Tom.
Most of you know us. We've been around for 39 years. A little bit of our story, when we started, there was no supply house, no anything. We had to make these units. We had to figure out everything, work our way through the codes. So it's been a long process, and getting through the maze of learning the RNG has been real similar. We've had RNG in our pumps off and on for about 4 years. We've had a little bit of complicated supplier issues. I'm wanting to talk about that just a little bit. When I say supplier issues, in the beginning, some of the landfills that we were contractually connected to couldn't keep up with the amount of RNG that we were using at our fill stations. And so there was months that we didn't get checks. And, it's hard to read every line of every contract when they send you these 15-page contracts. And you learn to start asking the right questions. And we learned those questions. We had to switch suppliers. And I think they were learning the process as well. So it was really, more of a learning, understanding the whole part of it. But it's been good for us. One of the things it's done at my CNG stations, I buy my gas in contracts. So I buy multi-year contracts sometimes. And doing that has allowed me to keep my stations at $1.75 for the last 4 years. And I bought my gas for 2 more years. So depending on RNG and the tax credits that hopefully will get renewed, we're looking forward to keeping our price the same. And with my customers, most of it, there's always been cheaper fuel than my stations, by a quarter or a dime, or there's always been someone cheaper. But what I tell them is I'm the same month over month, year over year. And through this process, it allows you to build a budget for your fueling of your vehicles. We operate compression at some of our stations, and we've got a vendor we've been now for 14 years and haven't had to change our price. And we're moving into more contracts, and we don't see that we need to change our price again. And all of it is the building blocks of how we run our stations. One of the things that we're trying to do also with the RNG, through this, we've learned there's a lot of small players that have small stations. And the big contract companies that are marketing, trying to get us to use their credits, aren't interested in dealing with the amount of paperwork that it takes to get a small supplier on. So we're working through the process to try to aggregate these people together and share the credits to get more stations, more smaller guys on these RNG incentives. And something that we've also learned is from when we started, the share of the credit has dramatically gone up in the last couple of years versus when we first started, where we were getting a fraction of the credit, and felt lucky to get that, honestly. And now with the amount of fuel we're using, and then we're aggregating, starting the first year, one of our big customers, we're going to aggregate their fuel with our fuel, and we're going to be able to distribute credits to them as cash. And cash is king in this deal. And when you're using this much fuel, even a dime, 15, 20 cents a gallon is a lot when you're buying thousands of gallons a day. And so that's a lot of where we're at. In Oklahoma, we have such a great incentive program to even have vehicles on CNG. We get this very generous tax policy from the state if you pay taxes for your vehicles, and then we get a 45% credit on the cost of the station. So that's very generous also. That's let us build stations in locations that really were on the border of not having a station. But without these credits, we were able to build the station and pass the savings on to the owner. And it's a process. That ain't something you just give them cash that day. It's a process over time. And then like the vehicles, we have a very generous program with the state on the size of your vehicle. So if you're looking at a 3/4 ton pickup, there's a $9,000 state tax credit. And man, and I don't know if you understand credits or not. Federal credits can be a little wishy-washy. State credits are real. They're dollar for dollar real credits. And you have the 5 years to carry those out. So they are real credits. The second thing we've got in the state is Oklahoma Natural Gas has been very generous returning their credits as a rebate program. So again, let's look at the 3/4 ton pickup, the class 2 pickup. That's a $5,000 cash rebate. So between that and the $9,000 state credit, you're almost 100% of your pickup conversion being paid for. And then with my guaranteed fuel savings, me maintaining my price, you'll have your payback in less than a year. And it's hard to explain it to somebody. More and more people don't believe me until I show them the state policy and the Oklahoma Natural Gas rebate in writing. And it's an amazing place that we're at here in Oklahoma. Other states envy us a lot. I have trucks that have 400,000 miles on them, and I can contribute that to taking good care of our trucks and compressed natural gas. And it's just hard to explain that to people, excuse me, that have to replace their trucks every 2 or 3 years because they're wore out. And if they take good care of them and run them on natural gas, it changes the whole deal. One of the things we like about the way the RNG credits works is my original credits were coming from a landfill in Michigan, and getting people to understand that I'm not actually burning the molecule that was stuck in the line in Michigan. I'm burning the local molecules that came locally. They just passed the paperwork across the line to us. And that is a little hard to get everybody to understand that we're not moving molecules, we're moving paperwork. But one thing that we're fixing to do here at our company is we're fixing to install, and we want to build the offtake systems where we can bring natural gas in from qualified producers and dump it in the pipeline. We already manufacture that equipment. We just have to make the tap and put it in the ground. And again, that's a partnership that we're working through how that's going to work, but it's going to happen here. You'll be able to bring your RNG to our facility and put it in the pipeline. And then the paperwork will get distributed to wherever you're receiving your credits at. And, it's hard to explain the whole system, but in a nutshell, that's what we're fixing to do. So it's hard to take the complication out of it. We went through such a hard process of getting with the right partners to get these credits to flow seamlessly every month. You want to, and there's local people that can do these credit incentives. You don't have to shop all over the country. And I get inundated with people calling me every single month trying to get me to take their RNG credits. I'm a real big local guy. I want to look at the guy across my table and talk about the credits and understand where they're coming from. And I wish all of my credits were coming from Oklahoma cows or Oklahoma landfills. I'm moving to try to work it that way with our partners that are supplying me the credits, but it's a process, and I know we'll get there someday. And that's about most of what I'm doing as far as credits.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. Did you want to speak at all a little more on working with the tax exempt groups too?
Yeah, so what I've done on tax exempt guys, I built a station for the city of Manford, and I owned it for a couple of years. And over time, as I collected all my tax credits, then I was able to sell that station at a very modest price for they could own their station one day. And there's a process through that, a legal process that the state has set up that we can distribute the credits, the state tax credits around, which helps. And then even with the RNG credits, we're investigating that same process to make sure if you have a small fleet that you're getting handled correctly. And when you get brought into a bigger pool, like what ours is, that you're getting fair distribution for your credits, for the amount of fuel you're using. And obviously we're going to take a little piece off that, but to handle the paperwork, to bring it all together. But it is confusing. Our partner group that we're bringing together here in Tulsa will be able to clean that up for you and make it where a small city or even a large city, we don't really have a size that disqualifies anybody, but we can bring and help you with your credits. And a lot of it you're going to learn from our experience, from the mistakes I've made, and we're not going to do that again. And learning the amount of paperwork now versus the paperwork when we first got started is tenfold with the EPA. And having the guys that understand how to get that paperwork through is a big deal. And there's been times where I was frustrated and almost quit the process over the paperwork and the compliance. And our group is going to be able to help you all the way through that and make it where you just receive checks.
Awesome.
So
Well, sorry, if you had something else you wanted to say there.
No, I'm good. That's about all I've got.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. And he just noted on some of those kind of confusing elements of monetizing these different incentives. And I know that Jenny will be touching on a little bit more of that here with her part of the presentation today. A little bit about Jenny. She graduated from the University of Tulsa with a petroleum engineering degree and started her career as an engineer in the oil and gas industry for Cimarex Energy. Over the past 20 years, her work has focused on strategic planning and development of projects within the traditional energy industry, the carbon offsetting and sustainability space, and the renewable energy industry. She's currently a managing partner for Black Mesa Advisors, where she's focused on supporting the expansion of renewable natural gas efforts in Oklahoma and across the states. Please welcome Jenny Hellman.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Tom, for your slides as well. Just a little, I'm going to give you a little bit more about Black Mesa, and then I will jump into some of the more nitty-gritty of what the Renewable Fuel Standard is, how that works, and then also some of the regulatory updates on what's been going on in the last year. So Black Mesa Advisors was founded in 2024. I sit in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so close to some of you at least. And like Michelle said, my background was originally in the oil and gas space and then transitioned into this clean energy, renewable energy space about 5 years ago. And at Black Mesa, we are more on the very front end. So on Yanni's slides where it showed the cow and the feed, what we call the feedstock, we are working with groups that are called developers to help get those projects designed, how to do strategy on them, and then how to build them, and then how to tie them to all of the partners along the supply chain. And just as an example, the photo that you guys are looking at is a renewable natural gas facility that sits in Lawton, Oklahoma. So this is a real example in our state, built right next to a landfill. Can't see the landfill, but it's up the hill behind it. And that's a processing facility that takes that gas off the landfill and gets it ready to be put into a pipeline. So that's a real example that just got finished earlier this year and is one of, I think, one of Yanni's 15 that is on his map for Oklahoma. If you can go to the next slide. So I thought it would be helpful to put some names of real companies. Most of them are actually in Oklahoma that would go along with Yanni's slide that was showing here's how you go from cow waste all the way to gas getting used, natural gas getting used in your vehicle, just to kind of run through that whole value chain again. And as both Yanni and Tom kind of touched on, it's a pretty complicated supply chain, value chain. There are a lot of players. So one of the first things you kind of do when you get in the space is try to get your arms around who does each piece of the puzzle. So on the very front end, what we call your feedstock owner, which is gonna, by feedstock, we mean what's the physical material that is putting off gas. So I used Waste Management as an example. So they have landfills all over the country. Those landfills are emitting gas. That's one starting point. It can also be off of dairy digesters, like Yanni mentioned, or off of crop residue, just some different examples. So that's step 1 of 10. Sorry, guys. So step 2 is what we call the tech providers, and those are going to be groups like Biofirm, is the group that did the one at Lawton. They take the gas that comes off of the landfill or off of the digester, and they do all of the cleanup. So if you're in the oil and gas world, it's things like they're taking H2S out of the gas. They're taking carbon dioxide out of the gas. They're taking all of we call them dirties, but they're just things that can't go in your pipeline. So they put the actual pieces of equipment on the facilities that clean up that gas. So now you have a third group, that's your project developers that are actually in charge of working with the tech providers, working with the landfills to get the actual facility built on site. A group we've worked with here in Oklahoma is called Vision RNG. There's also Spark Renewables who might be on this call. They're a local group as well. Then you've got your actual, yeah, good question. What happens to the dirties? So the H2S and the things called siloxanes, which are like what comes from your plastic, are actually they're more or less caught in beds. So it's like a filter bed, and that gets stuck in the filter, and then those filters are disposed as hazardous waste. So it's not getting vented. It's like stuck in the membranes, basically. Hopefully that helps. I didn't see the other question. Maybe I'll come back to it. So the next group is your construction partners, your engineering and construction partners here in Oklahoma. B&H Construction has built multiple RNG facilities. They built that one in Lawton. So that's an example of a group you would work with to actually get it built. Okay, so now you've got a built facility that's producing natural gas. like Yanni said, it looks exactly like natural gas and all your other pipelines. So then you've got your actual pipeline partners. So One Oak, that's their logo. That's an example of a group in Oklahoma that has taken renewable natural gas onto their system. So it's a tap just like any other pipeline tap. And then when you get done, you're flowing renewable natural gas through the pipe. And as Tom said, this is where it gets to be somewhat of a paperwork. Game's the wrong word, but you're very rarely flowing that renewable natural gas exactly to the end point where you are selling that renewable natural gas. It becomes commingled on your pipe. And it's really how it works in all other oil and gas space. So if you produce a barrel in West Texas, you can buy that barrel at your gas station in Oklahoma, but it's a different barrel, if that makes sense. So it's a paperwork trail of where those molecules are going. Okay, so now you've got it flowing on the pipeline. There's a separate group I'm calling asset managers. These are bigger groups with large balance sheets that end up owning those facilities at the end of the day. NextEra is the owner of the facility sitting in Lawton. So these are big energy providers that might actually own the renewable natural gas facility at the end of the day. Then you've got what we call your off takers. And I know you guys are probably like too much, but these are all of the pieces in that supply chain that Tom was just talking about. Your off takers or purchase agreement partners, these are groups like Shell that actually buy the renewable natural gas and then provide it to fueling dispensers. And then those fueling dispensers would be groups like Tom or Love's is another group in Oklahoma that has lots of CNG stations. And that's where they connect to the fuel users, which is you guys, the fleet. Then you've got kind of two other ancillary groups that are involved that you may hear about. You've got all your advisors on the tax side for the tax incentives that Tom mentioned, legal advisors to help you navigate policy changes that may be happening, permitting advisors. A group that we've worked with for all of that is called eco engineers, if you want kind of a larger firm. And then lastly, you've got your investors. So the groups that are paying for all of these facilities to get built. Okay, can go to the next slide. This one will get a little more practical. I just wanted you guys to see names that you're familiar with that play at each part of that supply chain. So now, like, how is renewable natural gas actually monetized and how does it work differently than natural gas? And there's really kind of two routes that this works. One is called the voluntary market and the other is the Renewable Fuel Standard transactions. And I'll go into more details on that on the next slide. But the voluntary market, you're basically selling two products. You're selling the physical natural gas. You sell it the same way you sell natural gas. So NYMEX pricing, if you're used to that kind of lingo, which is like up at $4.50 in MCF right now. So that's your product one. Your second product is what we call the environmental attribute. And that basically just means you're getting a price premium because you're producing natural gas with a lower emissions footprint than normal natural gas. And by that, I just mean there's less emissions going into the atmosphere for every 1 MCF a day of gas produced. And groups like Google or Meta or big processing facilities will pay a premium to be able to say we ran our systems on renewable fuels. So that's group number one. That is completely voluntary. It's not regulated. There's not a federal what is the word I'm trying to say? There's not a federal mandate that's making you do that. That's just a voluntary. We want to buy gas that is sourced renewably. Okay, the second option, which is mostly what we've been talking about on this call, comes from the Renewable Fuel Standard. And this is an EPA-based program. And if you go this route, you're really selling two products. You're selling your physical gas, same as traditional natural gas. And then you're selling what's called RINs. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so what actually is the Renewable Fuel Standard and what is a RIN, because we're using all these acronyms. So the Renewable Fuel Standard is, again, it's a program administered by the Environmental Protection Agency, and it was originally created in 2005 by the Energy Policy Act and then expanded in 2007. So it is a long-standing federal policy or federal program that has made it through multiple administration changes. Both sides of the aisle have been in charge, and this has still survived. So that's kind of point number one, is it's been around and been established quite a while. And what it does is it requires refiners or procurers of road fuel in the US, or transportation fuel, to have a minimum percentage of renewable fuels. So this is not the real math, but it'd be like if you're Shell and you produce 1,000 gallons of diesel, 2% of that needs to be renewably sourced. That percentage changes every year, but just as an example, they have an obligation to have part of their fuel be renewably sourced. Each gallon equivalent of fuel produced, so each gallon of diesel, each gallon of RNG, if it's renewably sourced, it generates 1 RIN per gallon. So a RIN is equal to 1 gallon of fuel, of transport fuel. The program was again designed to reduce reliance on foreign imports and to support domestic renewable fuel industries. So like Yanni mentioned, this has still gotten the thumbs up, is a bad way of saying it, but like even under this administration, it's still getting thumbs up because it is supporting domestic production of fuel and energy security by having additional ways of producing fuel other than just traditional fossil fuels. And then the other thing I would add, and I think we're going to deep dive on this on the next webinar, so I can answer questions if there are questions at the end. But as Tom mentioned, because it's for transport fuel, the whole program, you have to prove that your renewable natural gas was used as transport fuel. And the way they do that is by tying it to dispensing meters. So if you have a CNG dispensing meter, then you can participate in that RIN value chain, and you can get a percentage of the value when those RINs are sold. Hopefully I didn't make that too confusing. Okay, if you want to go to I think this is my last slide. So then just a bigger picture, if you zoom out on the regulatory piece, because a common question we get asked is, well, what's changed with this administration? Are these projects still viable? Like what is happening moving forward in this space? And we will fully admit that going into 2025, there was a giant question mark of what is going to happen in this space, given all of the changes. But in July, when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I think that's all the words, the OBA, as we like to call it, actually treated RNG pretty favorably, and especially as compared to how it treated wind, solar, and hydrogen. So renewable natural gas made it out pretty unscathed compared to some of the other renewable options that were being looked at. And kind of two different things that happened under that act. There's a big investment tax component for developers. So the front end, the people actually building out the RNG facilities, there's a federal level investment tax credit. The bill protected projects that are already underway. So if you're already building a project, you can still claim those investment tax credits as long as you're done by the end of 2028. So that was good for all projects that were already started. Moving forward, it shifts from an investment tax credit to a production tax credit. And in layman's terms, basically what that means is instead of getting a big chunk of money up front when you finish building an RNG facility, you get $1 per gallon produced. So it starts to look a little more like RINs in the way it's structured, but it's as you produce, but still significant tax benefits. So all of that summed up means there's still pretty big tax incentives to continue to build new RNG facilities in the US. And then the second piece, besides that One Big Beautiful Bill, is that the Renewable Fuel Standard stayed intact, and the EPA stayed intact. So there were questions around how all that was going to go. But that program is still standing. And right now the EPA is finalizing their rules on what percentage of fuel is going to be mandated to be renewables for the next couple of years. So that is still moving forward. So as we look at it as people in the developer space and supporting developers and people all along the supply chain, what that means is the rules for the next few years are mostly set, which means that investors and project partners can move forward with more confidence around here's what it's going to look like to build projects in this specific environment. I think that's, and yeah, again, if you want way more details on the Renewable Fuel Standard, the deeper dive webinar goes into much more of how does this actually functionally work and what do the numbers look like and what percentages could a fuel dispenser get, all those kind of nitty-gritty details.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Moving right along here. Our next speaker is Eli Pagel with B&H Construction. They are a user of renewable natural gas for their fleet. And so we're going to hear a little bit about their experience with RNG. And Eli, you should be able to unmute yourself. I think I got the settings figured out. So
perfect. Can everybody hear me?
yeah. And Eli, I didn't have a
Awesome.
biography for you, so please also tell us a little bit about yourself and B&H too.
Gotcha. So B&H Construction is a underground utility construction company in Oklahoma. I do business development for them. We know Tom very well. We know Jenny very well. We know lots of folks in the room. We have been in the CNG side of things. So our whole fleet is on CNG, and that's sort of where, from a fleet example, the conversation really starts in terms of RNG and renewable natural gas is from the CNG side. So where all this started was back in the day when diesel was $4 and $5 a gallon. We looked around and you know the cost of operating business was just escalating quickly, and a lot of that was due to those fuel costs. And we looked around and realized, you know, folks like Tom, and he mentioned it earlier, his fuel has been the same price for years and years and years at less than $2 a gallon. And we thought to ourselves, hey, it'd be great to fill up at less than $2 a gallon as opposed to $5 a gallon or wherever diesel may go. And so started looking at converting the fleet to compressed natural gas. And the cool thing about compressed natural gas is depending on your fleet size and structure is you can build your own fueling infrastructure. Tom's got some great resources. He's done a lot of the legwork like he talked about for being able to fuel your own fleet on site. Natural gas is readily available as well in Oklahoma. So some of that becomes pretty easy. And so that's what we did is we resulted in the fuel.
Uh-oh, Eli, we're having a little trouble with your audio coming through. I think we've lost the last 30 seconds or so.
My back.
All right, I think we can hear you again.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, it was a fuel savings metric for us. And then you start adding on some of the renewable incentives. If you're willing to do the paperwork, like Tom said, then it really becomes a great savings for a fleet. So really from the fleet perspective, it's a matter of what type of fuel do you want to use, and does the infrastructure and the fueling work for you in your fleet?
Alrighty. Eli, I'm not sure if we just lost the end of what you were saying there. Did you have anything else you wanted to note on like how it's worked out for B&H's fleet, or if you guys have had any challenges or surprises while using RNG?
No, it's been a great transition. The longevity of the equipment is fantastic. It's a clean burning fuel. The cost is an immense savings, and there's some maintenance savings as well for the fleet. So from a fleet operations standpoint, it's a no-brainer for us. And then again, the RNG stuff is just icing on the cake from an operational standpoint.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for those remarks. And I know we'll probably have some more questions for you as we get to Q&A. So I'm going to move right along then with our presentation and talk a little bit about some resources for fleets that might be interested in transitioning to natural gas, or if you already run on natural gas, making the switch to RNG. So firstly, wanted to prop up Tulsa Area Clean Cities as your local resource, of course. Actually, for today's webinar, we put together a special resource for you all that it's going to go onto our TACC website. It is a directory of local contacts. There are a few national companies on the list, but for the most part, we've kept it to local stakeholders of the coalition that work in the renewable natural gas space that you guys can talk to, reach out to when you're interested in moving forward, or if you want to see who you could possibly work with as partners. So I just popped that link into the chat to access that directory. We'll also send it out to the attendees after today's webinar. On our website, tulsacleancities.com, we do have a page dedicated for renewable natural gas. We will be posting the recordings for today's webinars onto that web page as well. More generally, Tulsa Area Clean Cities offers advising for fleets that are interested in transitioning fuels. So whether you're a public fleet or a private fleet, we can help you guys to look at your options, check out the types of vehicles and duty cycles that you're running, and see what types of solutions might fit best across the alternative fuel spectrum. But if you're interested specifically in CNG, then we can provide you guys with some tailored resources and guidance on who you might want to connect with, and also how to get started with that transition. We also have connections like this directory to lots of experienced industry partners and local examples, many of which are with us today. So thank you all so much for joining to share your expertise. Another resource is the Department of Energy's Alternative Fuels Data Center. This is kind of a hub for anything Department of Energy related to alternative fuels. So if you go to afdc.energy.gov, you can find a host of case studies and other publications regarding renewable natural gas. On the screen here, on the lower side, just showing a few of the examples from the AFDC as far as those case studies of renewable natural gas trucks in specific locations. If you want to read more about what other fleets have experienced and cost savings and all of that jazz, you can find that at the AFDC. You can also find very high-level basic information about renewable natural gas, as well as other alternative fuels. So if you ever want to revisit, kind of the basics of RNG, this is a great resource to check out. Another resource to you is the EPA's Renewable Fuel Standard program website. So Jenny went into kind of a high-level touch on the rather complex RFS program. If you want to dig more into it, please join that deep dive that she plugged. But also, this website is a great resource to come back to whenever you need to refresh your knowledge on the Renewable Fuel Standard. They also have some specific links to like pricing information on here as far as RIN pricing goes. They've got some great resources on compliance. And because the EPA is the agency that administers the RFS program, this is the go-to resource for any official information about the Renewable Fuel Standard. Another resource to you is the RNG Coalition. So the RNG Coalition advocates and educates for the sustainable development, deployment, and utilization of RNG. And they have a bunch of publications on their website that looked really interesting to me when I was just doing a quick click through. Lots of white papers that seem like they might be of interest to fleets that are considering RNG. The RNG Coalition has events both in person and online. I know I personally love to watch the RNG Coalition's webinars, and I tune in for a lot of those. And that's actually something that inspired this TACC webinar focused at the local level. So thank you all for the tremendous resources you provide. Yanni, while I'm on this slide, do you have anything else you want to plug about the RNG Coalition?
I believe that's everything. I will add that we do have multiple events throughout the year, with Summit being our mid-year, more policy-focused event. And there is always openings for non-members as well, especially for first-time non-members. Then end-of-year conference, which is our biggest, which is held in Dana Point, California, RNG conference, which is sort of an all-encompassing industry conference and open to non-members as well. And there's a discount for first-time non-members that are attending who seek to sort of learn more about the industry. There's also, tons of more member resources should anyone wish to join the RNG Coalition. And the memberships are very competitively priced based on the size of the member that's interested in joining.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next resource that I want to mention is the Transport Project. I have definitely seen a lot of materials from the Transport Project during my time working with Tulsa Clean Cities, but we actually have a Transport Project member, Black Mesa Advisors, that Jenny's with is one of those. So Jenny, I don't know if you want to speak to this slide a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So we're involved with the Transport Project alongside B&H Construction, and I actually just I'm going to read you off their website because it's RNG, but it's specifically transport vehicles, road vehicles focused. So it's a little like more focused on that piece. And who they are, the National Coalition of roughly 200 fleets, vehicle and engine manufacturers, services suppliers, and fuel producers and providers dedicated to decarbonizing the transport sector. And we have really appreciated being a part of their group, especially on the policy side. So a big part of what they do is policy advocacy tied to transport vehicles, and they are frequently sending out policy updates, regulatory updates, like very good at keeping you up to date at what's happening in DC for this specific set of the RNG industry. So if you're a fleet or if you are closely tied to fleets, like this is just like hyper focused on that piece of the equation. They're running a membership special right now for 2026, and that's just a list of some of the people who are involved in that. And I might also say, aside from the policy piece, it's just a really great place to network with other fleets who are managing transition to CNG usage, RNG usage, so just a good peer-to-peer learning space as well for that piece of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny. And that brings us lastly to the Q&A portion of today's program. I think we had a few questions in the chat, so I will tee those up for our speakers. But if anyone has a question, please use the raise hand function, and I will unmute you so you can ask that question. Okay, looks like we have one here from Eric that's in the chat, and he asks, what is the current landscape or market for non-transportation use of renewable natural gas in Oklahoma or nationally? He says, I know ONG offers renewable natural gas blocks to customers, but he hasn't heard anything about demand or utilization numbers.
I can answer that, Michelle. I was actually just typing up an answer. Um, I would say RNG definitely skews currently the total sort of landscape, skews towards transportation use. But it is certainly growing demand for heating, especially in the um, in the Northeast. If we're talking about other states besides Oklahoma, as well as for industrial processes as well. But I would say there's even some sort of emerging conversations around maritime use and other clean fuel standards, which are increasingly being talked about in some other states, specifically Michigan. There's even, I believe, a discussion around including sort of maritime use in credits that for RNG for maritime use in other states, sort of clean fuel standards. But it is I would say it's demand is certainly growing, but mainly around heating and industrial processes.
Awesome. As I wait for others to raise hands, I'll pop one here. So we talked about, how if a municipal fleet, for example, wants to sign an RNG contract, they would be getting RNG molecules from virtually anywhere where it's being produced coming through the pipeline system. So it's more of an accounting basis for that type of approach. But I'm curious if a municipality wanted to utilize its own RNG, say from like a wastewater treatment plant, what would be the differences in terms of like the project development and partnerships that would be involved in that type of project?
Yeah, so I can start that one, and then Yanni or Tom, if you want to add. So this is what was kind of the first initial 2 or 3 line items on that value chain. So in that instance, the municipality that has either a wastewater treatment plant or a landfill, they're what we call your feedstock provider. So they're the very first piece of the equation. And generally what has happened is they will partner with a project developer who will help them design the facility, help them find the construction partners, help them fund it. And the municipality providing the waste streams will get a percentage of the revenue from the project. So it's that front end piece of it as opposed to the very end with the fuel dispenser.
Michelle, I hate to ask, but my dog just knocked something over, so I missed a good portion of your question.
Oh, no worries. I asked if like, because we were talking about, if you're a fleet that's just trying to get on RNG, we covered more of like the contractual accounting basis approach for that type of project. But I was curious, since we have a lot of municipalities on the line, if a municipality wanted to use its own RNG from like a wastewater treatment facility, like what the differences would be maybe in the project development or the partnerships to take that approach.
I can't speak to so much as the differences, but there are many of examples of public-private partnerships, including many of our members, and many of our members are also municipalities that operate, especially, looking at, for example, solid waste sites. Um, so yeah, there's quite a few municipalities and counties as well that have. I live in Clark County, Washington, and it's a public utility, and they sort of implemented their own. They implemented their own program there that where they are requiring to have a certain percentage of RNG for their energy usage, and some of that comes from Washington, but that even they even some of their RNG they even get from a facility in Idaho. So especially when it's a city-owned utility or public utility, they have a lot that they're able to do.
Yeah, and I might add, Michelle, if you're a municipality and you're thinking about it, there's a really wide range of how big of a role the municipality can play depending on what they want. So if they want it to be very hands-off and just have a revenue portion, but outsource all the planning and the construction and the financing, you can go that route, or the municipality can be much more involved and be doing that design and sourcing of partners and funding themselves. So there's a wide range in how you can do that functionally, depending on bandwidth and interest level and doing all the pieces. So it's not a one size fits all in how it gets executed, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a very helpful point too. So it's not like a municipality has to figure it all out alone. They can find partners to kind of coordinate and facilitate a lot of that work then.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess one question, let me look here to see if anyone has a hand raised. Okay, another question that I have is, we talked about RIN credits, and we talked about how, capturing value from those RIN credits as a fleet end user can be, something that's a negotiation point. And so I'm curious about maybe what is a typical share of a RIN credit that a fleet could expect to receive, or is there any type of typical share?
Yeah, so we've seen, and Yanni, I'd be curious if you're seeing something different than this on your end. It has changed a lot in the past 12 to 18 months. Right now, I might tweak the answer a little bit. What we're seeing is anywhere from 10 to 15% could go to the fuel dispenser. So how they split that up with their fuel users is a piece that I'm not as familiar with, but that used to be more like 3 to 5% is going to the fuel dispensers, and now that's gotten all the way up to 15%. So in some cases, and then if you use a broker to help you facilitate that transaction, all in, it can be somewhere around 20 to 25% between the broker and the fuel dispenser, and then the other 75% stays with the producer of the RNG. So there's a really big range depending on how much fuel you're producing. Is it just one site? Are you aggregated, like some of the things Tom mentioned earlier? But that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much deviation from that. I think that Tom could probably speak a little more to it. Certainly will probably depend on the contracts.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, in the beginning, we felt like we were getting we got about 7% in the very beginning. And, like I said, the contracts were not real vague. You need to read between the lines. When they weren't delivering the gas, we didn't get checks, even though we were doing our part on our end. And we had no idea in the front end that they were having trouble with the landfill or the plant or the paperwork or whatever. So a lot of that is smoothed out. We're not having that problem right now, and we are getting more. Now, the way we give back our fuel credits is in savings at the pump. We're able to reduce our price or hold our price. Now, with some new partners we're bringing in, we're actually going to pass them on a check based on the volume that we all ran and the contract that we can write as far as the credits. But it's definitely a different ballgame when I'm coming with a larger pile of credits than it was when you're only doing 200 or 300 gallons a day. When you look at them, you're in 4 and 5, 6,000 gallons a day. It's a whole new ballgame. And we're trying to understand legally how much we can aggregate together, if we can. So we're still stepping through that minefield right now. And, but I know in Oklahoma, there's a lot of small guys that are in the 100 gallon a day that don't think it's worth it to deal with the paperwork on the credits to get that money. And that's why we want to try to bring them together and make larger pools. But we also understand there could be paperwork nightmare on our end. We're trying to figure it out.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody else in the audience have a question for our speakers? Please raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
Am I allowed? Can I ask a question?
Yeah. No, please do. Please
I
do.
have a question for Yanni. You showed your RNG, like your smart program goals, and I'm curious over the last one, that's really impressive. So that's cool to see. But do you have like these were the top 2 or 3 things that were most effective to get us to those goals? Like what worked the best to move projects forward?
Absolutely. And having been here now for a year, I truly feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants because a lot of the work had already been laid out, sort of as an example. But California's LCFS I would say, has been the primary driver, but specifically when the avoided methane crediting was implemented, because as soon as that was put in, you saw hundreds of projects being built in California, but also projects as far as New York being built that were producing RNG for the California market. But it's been a selling point as well in some of those states. I mentioned Michigan, which there's a great conversation, and sort of a rebranded Clean Fuel Standard. And instead of it being called the Clean Fuel Standard, it's the Competitive Fuel Act. And we've had some great discussions, and it's been very bipartisan because there's farmers that have anaerobic digesters that are creating RNG to send to California, and a lot of the draw for Republicans is that we have all these farmers that are part of this sector. We should, maybe that fuel could stay here in Michigan if we had a similar program.
Mhm. So policy that supported local action or state level action.
Yeah, as it's been said, yeah, all politics is local, and I think that it's not just good policy, but it's good politics too. When you truly get when you're able to, you look at especially farmers, which are often forgotten in terms of advancing technologies and this sort of green revolution. But it's fantastic that this is an industry where farmers can add another revenue stream. And they're able to really be a part of the solution.
Thanks.
All
I
right.
think one
One.
person I should say one
Oh,
person
there
in
is
the
a
chat-
question.
No, I was gonna, sorry. One person in the chat asked about conversions. I put a link in there to the RNG Coalition site because they have a really handy conversion table for RINs. So if you're trying to figure out like how many gallons is a RIN or how many MCF, like I use that cheat sheet a lot. So if you need it, it's in there. It's in the chat. Like,
Awesome. That's a great resource. I see John has his hand up, so I'm gonna enable your mic. You should be able to unmute yourself, John.
Sorry, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, it's just a follow-up for Yanni. I'm Jenny's partner at Black Mesa, by the way. I'm curious. I know the LCFS market had quite a bit to do with propelling, a lot of these different RNG projects. But the price of those LCFS credits and those alternative fuel credits have come down dramatically since, the $200 mark, which helped get those all off the ground for investors. And we're seeing a slowdown, at least from our purview, in some of those digester projects. Do you have any input, do you think, on maybe what might drive it, or any growth for those fuel market credits over, through 26 and 27?
Absolutely, and I would definitely say that a lot of that is on the state, and it's the importance of when you do have a credit market like this, you need to consistently sort of look back at the carbon intensity targets. I think Washington State recently passed House Bill 1409, which we were very active on. Washington State's hasn't really they've created some projects, but because of the low carbon intensity targets, the credits weren't priced that well, and we didn't see much production there be increased. I think once once 1409 specifically for Washington is going to be implemented, we're going to see a difference in production increase, especially since there was a decent rulemaking which preserved avoided methane crediting. But I mean, for example, even look at Oregon. I think Oregon is a very good example. Credits exploded, but they also have these great carbon intensity targets that they're committed to, and yeah, I think just very important on the regulatory side to continue updating these targets and make sure that they're more ambitious, which will allow for credit prices to rise to a point where it makes this increase in production possible. What I'll add as well, one clean fuel standard that is currently under consideration is in Illinois, and there's a real danger there because there's certain credits that are considering being added that aren't tied to fuel pathways, and it's very important to not sort of create a credit oversupply, especially when it's not actually tied to a transportation fuel. So just it's all important, sort of very, very, policy wonkish, but it's really important to, have a good policy to create a good market.
And Yanni, I don't know if you just saw in the chat, Richard Derricks asked if you know the latest on the prospect of renewal of the federal AFTC, alternative fuel tax credit, for those who don't know the acronym.
Yes, I unfortunately do not. I'm primarily focused on state policy, but I'd be happy to connect you, or I can connect to our head of the head of our federal team, or I can definitely provide an answer there.
I would add to that one, Richard, that the transport project that we brought up earlier as a potential resource, they have been working on this really hard the last couple of months and just sent a industry coalition letter to the Hill, I think this Monday, with over 200 supporters of both that and an RNG Incentive Act that would add additional incentive on the end user side. So they are involved in pushing that. Their feedback to us on the last policy call was just that getting anything bipartisan done between now and the end of the year is pretty much a no-go. So they're trying to get it back in front of the right sets of eyeballs for early in 2026 to see if they can start moving it again then. So that's kind of the last thing we've heard.
One question that I have here that I think would be helpful. I know we've been talking a lot about policy level changes and hopefully things staying pretty solid for RNG moving forward. But in general, I'm curious if there are any changes that you expect to see in the RNG landscape that folks, especially fleets, should be prepared for. I was thinking especially I know that there's a lot more like production coming online. I'm not sure if that's there's kind of a boom happening right now, or if that's impacting anything for fleets or other end users.
I can speak a bit to it. As I mentioned, we just had our end of year industry conference, and there was a great panel around fleet users, and from at least from what I heard, and this was some of the large, UPS, I know Amazon was there, and I think at least from what they were saying, these larger fleets were saying that many fleets didn't want to buy new trucks. There was a lot of uncertainty the last couple of years, and this year, at least in the tail end, is the first year that there's more hopefulness, and there's more interest in terms of expanding their fleets and purchasing new trucks, and definitely also the excitement around the new Cummins engine. So I think that there's a lot of hopefulness and looks to expand, and that also means more of an appetite for RNG in the space.
Awesome. And I guess maybe to build on that, Like, do you think that more activity in general in the RNG industry, is that going to have like a positive impact for fleets looking for contracts and like their RIN share?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I mean, capitalism, the more supply there are, it's better for the consumer.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of the time we had scheduled today, so I want to thank everybody again for being here. For our speakers, thank you too as well for taking the time out of your schedules. Are there any last remarks that any of you would like to offer to our attendees today?
I think I would just, Michelle, if there are people who have questions in the audience that come up afterwards and they want to reach out, like feel free to reach out with further questions because I know we covered quite a bit of acronyms and different pieces of the puzzle. So happy to answer other questions if they come up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that offer. And I'll extend the same from Tulsa Clean Cities. We would love to connect further on specific RNG initiatives, projects you guys are interested in. I do have contact info for our speakers here today, everybody but Eli. So thank you as well to Eli for joining us and giving the fleet perspective. I think it's been a very insightful program today, and we did record it, so it's going to live on and have even more of a reach in the future. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And we will send out materials from today that were shared, some of those resources with you all following the event. But please stay in touch, and we look forward to seeing most of you on our deep dive webinar. Thank you so much.